Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here in Coruña today to join your discussions about the first experiences under Horizon 2020. Spanish entities have been very active in the first calls. I think if my figures are correct, there have been more than 5,000 applicants from Spain, many of them successful, as has just been pointed out by your Secretary General. And I'm very interested in hearing about your experiences. Now, let me just recall the main elements of Horizon 2020 against which I will later assess our first experiences. You know that this is a budget, that this is a program where the budget has been significantly increased compared to the last framework program, which is not self-evident in a time where the overall budget of the European Union has been cut by 4%, research and innovation has been increased significantly, and the overall objective of this research framework program is to strengthen the EU's global position in research and innovation and technology. This is decisive because there are significant changes, radical changes in the world research landscape. China has catched up with Europe when it comes to expenditure for research and innovation. Both Europe 28 and China has now about 2% of its GDP spent in research and innovation. We need to respond to economic crisis to invest in jobs and growth. And finally, we need to address people's concerns about their livelihood, safety, environment. These are the overall objectives. Here you see the budget distribution. I think it is familiar to you. The lion's part goes to societal challenges, followed by excellent science, industrial leadership. Now, what is new? And I think this is important because a little bit later I will focus in particular on these new elements and whether our first experiences and lessons confirm that our objectives in this respect have been met. It's a single program. We have put all research and innovation programs in one single program. What is important for you as applicants and participants is that the rules applicable to these different elements are identical all over the Horizon 2020 program. Really at the core of Horizon 20, and I will come back on this issue at many occasions a little bit later, we want to couple research to innovation. We want to fund the research to retail all forms of innovation. Why is this important? Because you know that one of the weaknesses of Europe is that we are very strong in producing excellent science, but we are less good in translating this science in concrete results. So impact of research is a key expectation under Horizon 2020, or as our Vice President Katainen has put it recently in a tweet, he said, Europe is very good in turning euros into research, but less good to turn research into euros. And I think that is one of the key elements we want to achieve impact under Horizon 2020. Evidently, and related to impact, we want to focus on societal challenges with which the society is faced, health, clean energy, transport, all these elements. And finally, also a key concern for many of you is about simplification. Rules that on the one hand are simple in the sense that they facilitate your administrative tasks, but as a consequence also produce less errors and expose you to lesser risks in terms of recovery. This is also very important since just the latest report of the Court of Auditors under Framework Program 7 has still pointed out that the error rate in research funding is about 4.6%, which is not negligible and constitutes a risk for our policy. So simplification evidently has an objective to reduce administrative burden on all of you, but also to reduce in turn the error rate. Now, to the first experience. Let me just relativize what means first experience. we need to be prudent about these first experiences in many respects, because firstly, not all calls under the first work program 2014, not all 65 calls have yet been finalized and grants have been concluded. I think it's just about 40 calls that are finalized yet, so we do not have the final results even of the first work program. Secondly, and this is related to what I have just said, the key focus on Horizon 2020 is to deliver impact, and evidently we do not know yet whether these first grants we have concluded will deliver the expected impact, which is at the heart of Horizon 2020. So these figures and messages I will just deliver now is a very preliminary analysis. Still, we think it shows certain trends. Let me start with the fact that we were very successful in launching immediately after the Horizon 2020 program has been concluded by the legislative authorities in around 6 or 7 December 2013. We were able to launch the first calls, I think, immediately afterwards. So this was a success. We have launched 65 calls. You know that for the first time we have announced 2 years work programs, a work program for 2014 and 2015. This was also done in order to facilitate your work, to give you more planning horizons when it comes to the submission of your proposals. We have opted for broader and fewer topics, and the overall amounts that are available in terms of spending for 2014 and 2015 are about 50 billion euros. All these work programs were based on a strategic work program which has introduced the key elements for funding. Now, the second key element, and I think in particular in this respect we would very much appreciate your feedback, is about simplified operations. And I think there are mainly 2 elements, 2 building blocks for such a simplified operation. The first one is, I think we have really succeeded to have a quite robust IT system and participant portal as a single gateway for all participants. This participant portal firstly did not break down when all the applications have been handed in. Do not forget, it has been more than, I think, until now, 35,000 applications. So you need quite a good IT system, in particular if you know that researchers tend to introduce their applications 5 minutes before 12. So there is quite a high stress test to be succeeded when it comes to the IT systems. And the second thing, I think, which we have really succeeded is that for the first time we have streamlined business processing and tried to reduce red tape, because we have a single business system, operational system for all grants, in despite whether they are spent or whether the key DGs are DG Connect, DG Move, DG Energy, whether the program part is implemented by an executive agency or by a joint undertaking. The business processes as such, the IT systems, are identical in all these places, and we really think that this constitutes simplification. So far to the architecture on simplification. Now, what are some figures with respect to response to Horizon 2020 calls in the first 2 months? Firstly, we have quite significant evidence that Horizon 2020 is of considerable interest to many researchers, stakeholders in Europe, because more than 2.1 million visits on participant portal in December 2013, and increasing in the following months, just over 3 million visits per month. This certainly shows interest. This is then confirmed by more than 35,000 proposals that have been submitted until today under Horizon 2020. We need to contract, to evaluate all these proposals, more than 11,000 experts. You can imagine that this is quite a challenge to put together evaluation panels to evaluate so many proposals. So we had to contract 11,000 experts. What we also think we have achieved, and this was one of the major objectives, since we want to translate research to new product, services, business models, is that we have quite some signs now that we have succeeded to attract newcomers and evidence of increase of industry participation in Horizon 2020. And after all, this high number of applications reflects the popularity of Horizon 2020. Now, I come to the lessons learned from the first Horizon 2020 calls. And this analysis has as an objective, evidently, to take stock, to prepare necessary corrective measures when we launch, in particular, the calls for 2016 and 2017, but also for our business processes. And this first experience is based on statistical analysis of concluded calls. I just have given you a first taste of this source. It comes from feedback from Commission services and executive agencies, observers' reports from evaluations. As you know, in our evaluation of submitted proposals, there is a so-called independent observer who gives his opinion as to how the evaluation in a given call has been carried out. And finally, we rely on feedback from stakeholders, certain national contact points, and some member states. And after today, also, we will rely on your experiences. Now, the first point I would like to address is the visibility of the work program and information for applicants. Our objective was an easy retrieval of information and simplified access for all applicants. What we have as feedback is that participant portal was really valued by the research and innovation community, but work program needs to be even more visible. And a second point, delays in handling questions and providing information to national contact points and applicants. These were the two findings. So what we intend to retain as recommendations is to enhance presentation of calls in the participant portal, to continuously improve Horizon 2020 IT system, reinforce Commission efforts to help national contact points to do their job. I think this is important, because nobody can expect the Commission services to provide answers to all the thousands and thousands of questions we receive. And I think, therefore, national contact points play a key role in providing feedback to participants and applicants. And finally, update regularly and frequently asked questions. Response to calls. Our objective was that we have challenge-based calls, allowing applicants considerable freedom to come up with innovative solutions and focusing more on impact. So two elements. Still we are within a challenge, but to resolve this challenge, the proposals should be bottom-up, and they should in particular address impact. They should make it plausible that this project will achieve impact. Now, what are our findings in this respect? Firstly, we got the impression that the challenge-based approach is liked by the research and innovation community. Also, the focus regarding the expected impact could still be sharpened. We have attracted newcomers, and we have evidence of increase in industry participation. Perhaps one of the reasons for the high number of applications and consequently the lower success rate is exactly the fact that we have these open calls, which might attract much more potential applicants than if the call is focused and more targeted. So I think this is one element that explains the high number of applications. Still, we think that the picture remains largely diverse and requires further analysis. Around 1/3 of good proposals, that is the proposals that have succeeded the quality check, the excellence check, the impact check, can be funded. And maybe the last point, which is very important and which you might have also experienced, is that we were not good when it comes to the management of the first and second stage proposals, because the success rate in the first stage of proposals was much too high. So people go to the second stage, and the likelihood that they do not succeed in the second stage will still be very high. So we really need to address this issue. The recommendations, therefore, are: evidently, we have to look at the reasons for the increase of number of applications. I told you one. Another one certain is that member states' budget, or the budget of certain member states for research and innovation, is declining. So there is a further stress on European funding. So we need to analyze reasons for increase of number of applications. But at this stage, I would not draw a conclusion which says that there is higher oversubscription all over the place. We need really to analyze all the different instruments, and the messages might afterwards be quite at geometry variable, in the sense that in certain places like Marie Curie or European Research Council, the number of applications might not necessarily significantly increase. We want to maintain the challenge-based approach, but, as I indicated, improve clarity of topic descriptions and the description of the expected impact. And we have to adapt call conditions for the two-stage evaluations, ensuring a 1-to-3 ratio in the second phase, so that at least 1 out of 3 calls who has made it to the second stage will succeed. But we do not want to put into question the one and the two-stage proposal principle in certain areas, because there are even voices now which give a little bit the message: in order to be able to submit an excellent 15-page proposal in the first stage, you already need to know in detail your research project. This might be true, but still remember that for the first stage proposal, you do not need all the details regarding the consortium, the details of financial management and all these elements. So even if this is true, there is still considerable simplification in a two-stage call. Let me come to the proposal evaluation. Objective evidently is that we have a high quality of our evaluation process. The findings in this respect is that according to observers' reports, overall the quality is excellent, with a good mix of experts. Let me insist on this. Since I've just indicated that impact and translate research into new processes, products, business models is at the heart of Horizon 2020, this has also to be reflected in the qualifications of our expert evaluators. So we have really insisted that in our evaluation panels are not only scientific, but also people who have a competence and capacity in managing innovation. And as you see in the next point, we have these qualifications now in our expert panels, but still the question as to how to assess impact is a point which requires further consideration. As we are as we have so many applications, as we have so many candidates, we are almost running out of expertise, in particular when it comes to women expertise, because one of our objectives is that in evaluation panels we have equal opportunities, in the sense that 50-50 should be men and female in evaluation panels. But we also run out of experts who have exactly these qualifications in innovation. So if you are not yet on the list for evaluation experts, please register. And there was a last point in this respect which has raised quite some concerns from the participants. It was the question of feedback to non-successful proposals, in particular in the area of health and small and medium-sized enterprises. The recommendations which we draw from these lessons learned is that we have to further update briefings and guidelines documents, including information for applicants and evaluation process in response to feedback received, reinforce efforts to attract experts, and develop a set of minimum standards on feedback, which we have already done, but do not lose out of sight that we as an organization are under considerable pressure now, because, as you know, the number of applicants is quite high. At the same time, we have now to respect the 8 months time to grant, in certain areas, fast-track innovation, even 6 months. So for so many proposals, provide detailed feedback is quite a challenge, in particular in the small and medium-sized area operations, and maybe my colleague later today will develop on this matter. There are other points which we need to address. We need to carry out further monitoring of the implementation process, in particular the time to grant. I've seen the first figures now for the calls which we have concluded. We have respected for almost all calls the time to grant of 8 months, which is a real challenge, but which has also required that we change our working modalities. Maybe some of you have been candidates for grants under Framework Program 7, and you were used to so-called negotiations. So once you have been chosen, there was still time spent on fine-tuning and getting the grant better based on recommendations of evaluations. We have given clear indication to the evaluators that they need to judge a proposal on the basis of what has been introduced and not what this proposal could look like if changes still occur. So there will be, and there should be, no negotiations under Horizon 2020. The proposal is evaluated on the basis of what has been submitted and not his potential if you add three other participants to the consortium, whether you this or that. No, if your proposal is not good enough, he gets bad marks and he is out. There is no potential to recatch the whole thing through the negotiation process. This was also one of the conditions to be able to respect time to grant. Evidently, there is still a possibility that you, the participants, request that the time to grant is extended because you are not ready, you cannot meet certain demands from our side. But there we have to insist very much that this is clearly set out so that it is not in our field that these management objectives cannot be met. And the second point is we have to address key features and novelties upstream in the work program preparation cycle to ensure embedding in priority setting as well as implementation. Now, I come back to this question of covering the full research and innovation cycle. In the work program 2014-2015, at several places, particular emphasis has been paid on this more support for innovation, activities close to market, and demand-side approaches. 2 billion euros have been ring-fenced to 100 topics for innovation actions in societal challenges and innovation in industrial leadership area. 120 million for innovation procurement, and 5 inducement prizes are now introduced in 2015. I come back later on this point. Engagement of industry. About 800 million are ring-fenced for contractual PPPs, 560 million for SME instrument topics, more than 1.7 billion investment in CDTI.es, 630 million goes to debt and equity facilities to leverage more money from the private side, and there are also substantial investments in public partnerships. So the first calls, I think, will show that we have increased industry participation, a good uptake of innovation actions. Other new innovation instruments need still to be monitored because they have not been rolled out entirely. And we need to continue and, where appropriate, reinforce broad approach to innovation, which for us is not only technological innovation, as you know, but also social innovation and in the field of services. On the SMEs, work program 2014-2015. As you know, there are SME opportunities all over the place. In Horizon 2020, 20% of the expenditure under the pillars, societal challenges and industrial leadership should be targeted to SMEs, but then we have still the Eurostar joint programming and capacity, debt and equity financial instruments. We have the SME instrument as such, which will be presented later in the afternoon. So again here, the first calls show that we have around 80% of funding for SMEs. So we have still to improve in order to achieve the 20%, but full impact of SME instrument needs still to be keen and might help us to get to this 20%. And again, this you will see in detail this afternoon. We had a very successful launch of the SME instrument with a very high demand, with a very low success rate, only 6%, but every second of the proposals who qualified was still selected. Now, a subject which is, I guess, very close to the heart of many of you and to the research community in general, it's the embedding of social sciences and humanities in Framework Program 7. Firstly, we have really made an attempt to embed social sciences and humanities in calls and lines of activity of all work program parts, including through addressing end-user perspectives. In short, 199 SSH-flagged topics, so more or less in 30% of the topics in the work program, are flagged as SSH relevant, representing a budget share of 5.3, which is considerably larger than what has been dedicated to social science and humanities under FP7 when it comes to these topical areas. We have significant opportunities in Maria Sklodowska-Curie actions. About 11% of budget is dedicated to SSH, and in ERC, where 17% of the available funding, which, as you know, has been increased by almost, it has been increased from 7 billion to 30 billion, and 17% is dedicated to SSH. So our impression from the first calls is that the SSH coverage in proposals can be enhanced by, for example, improving wording of work program topic description and evaluator briefing. I admit that if you look at certain texts, you have the impression that there is still a sentence which says, okay, and we really would appreciate if social sciences and humanities would participate in the call as a kind of fig leaf. So I think if we are able, together with the SSH community, to further sharpen and define the expected role, the expected impact from the SSH, this would be of great help. We have also tried still, because I talked about innovation experts in the evaluation panels, but we have also insisted that SSH expertise is well represented in evaluation panels for exactly these SSH flagged topics. Another mainstream issue for Horizon 2020 is the gender aspect, where we have tried to explicitly integrate in all the sections of the work program the gender topic. In total, 99 gendered topics have been identified, which is 16% of the total in the work program. Specific calls under Science with and for Society are dedicated to the gender issue, and topics are flagged with access for applicants. So first calls, again, there is still room to improve gender balance in evaluation panels, but quite frankly, I tell you, it is not easy in all these panels to find this necessary woman expertise, for example, in space. If you have to evaluate space proposals, we have really tried, but you do not get 50% of experts, women experts, to assess space proposals. So this is a challenge. We try to do our best, but we do not ever succeed in all places. In some cases, we are above 50%. Gender issues more frequent in flagged topics. I think that's, again, an issue which we need to look at when we draw up the new work programs. And continued efforts need to address gender dimension in preparation and implementation of work programs. International cooperation. I think in this domain, further work is necessary. Why? The key message is that Horizon 2020 is generally open to all international participants and is targeted in all relevant work program parts. But it is also true that we have changed our policy when it comes to financing third-party participants, in the sense that we do not any longer automatically fund participants from emerging economies like the BRIC countries and Mexico. And evidently, despite all our efforts to increase international cooperation in Horizon 2020, this might be a factor which explains that we have yet not been entirely successful in attracting more international participants. We have still good levels of participation of third country participants in ERC and Maria Skłodowska-Curie. But again, we need to increase international cooperation activities, flagship initiatives together with accompanying actions, in particular in the societal challenges and the industrial leadership chapter. So now, how will we continue from here? We need very soon a confirmation of the budget for 2015. You might have heard that we are permanently struggling with the European Council, with the Council of Ministers, when it comes to provide the necessary funding for our transactions. You know that the 80 billion which are in Horizon 2020 are an indicative amount, are a reference amount, and member states, or in particular certain member states, try to reduce their contributions, in particular for payments. And this puts us every year in difficulties, and as you know, the budget for 2015 has not yet been decided between the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament, and recent attempts have just failed, I think, some days ago. So the Commission has now to propose a new budget, which will hopefully be adopted still before the end of the year, because otherwise we have the 1/12 rule that in January, February, March, we will have only at our disposal 1/12 of the budgets of 2014, which were considerably low in the research area, because Horizon 2020 was not yet, has not yet started. So this would not be a very favorable situation for research funding. We will launch new calls, in particular for Fast Track to Innovation. I understand that this is subject to a dedicated point also this afternoon. And we will also introduce 5 inducement prizes to induce technological breakthroughs in key areas. These 5 areas are material, reduction of particulate matter air pollution, 3 million, reduction of use of antibiotics for respiratory infection, 1 million, food scanner prize, 1 million, collaborative sharing of spectrum, 0.5 million, optical transmission, 0.5 million. These are our first attempts to provide or to go in the direction of output-based funding in this sense. Once you get this call, you get 0.5 million or 3 million euro, but you have not to support this 3 million through invoices, through specific expenditure. It's a flat rate payment which you will receive without further justification once you have got this prize. Next steps, lessons learned. We have to look at those issues that we can adapt in the short time, and evidently we have to strive for continuous improvements. You can be sure that this Horizon 2020 is not only a challenge for you because we have introduced quite some novelties, but evidently it's also a challenge for us as a public administration, and as I indicated at the beginning, we are certainly ready to take into account your feedback. We need further in-depth analysis and feedback from a wider audience, notably applicants, and as I said today, maybe this conference will also help us to get new ideas. And our ambition is to take into account this feedback when we draft the work program 2016-2017 that should be adopted in the 3rd quarter of 2015. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I really would like to encourage you, the Spanish researchers and companies, to further strive to benefit from the opportunities of Horizon 2020. As you know, the funding is allocated to the very best proposals with no national quotas, but I understand from your Secretary General that you had a good departure. Anyhow, under Framework Program 7, more than 11,000 participants from Spain have already been counted in FP7 projects, receiving a total of 3.2 billion euros of EU contribution. And as we have heard from your Secretary General, there are encouraging signs in terms of the substantial increase in the Spanish leadership of teams in Horizon 2020 collaborative projects. And I can assure you that your involvement will help us to deliver a program that will improve lives and create jobs until 2020 and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have questions, experiences, feel free to address them either through this or in writing to my email address. Thank you very much. Or to the addresses, I think I have it here. Participant portal, on all these places you are certainly welcomed to introduce your ideas. Thank you very much.